had this wild dream of I'm gonna go abroad and study. But my biggest problem was we don't have money. I only had $50 in my pocket because at that time that was the only amount of money which my dad could give me. So now what happens is I get myself educated, I get graduate with honors. I applied close to 10,000 jobs and I got 2 calls back. So even though I was working at Tesla, 90% of my income was coming back home by like 2022. I wanted to quit my job and get out of this and then completely switch to becoming an entrepreneur and do this real estate thing full time.
Welcome back to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, the show where we unpack how people build wealth while living life on their own terms. I'm your host, Aaron Amin, and today's guest is someone whose story is a masterclass in grit, grace, and transformation. Gaurav Dutta was born in India, raised in poverty, and against all odds, made his way back to America. He cleaned dorm bathrooms by day and studied by night, climbed the corporate ladder, faced crushing visa constraints, survived layoffs, heartbreak, and the loss of his mother, all while building a real estate portfolio that gave him financial freedom. He's back in India now, redefining success on his own terms and proving that wealth is more than money. It's wholeness, healing, and honoring where you came from. Gaurav, welcome to the show, man. It's so great to have you here. I've heard so much of your story from the couple conversations we've had so far, but I just thought it would be a wonderful thing to share it with our audience because there's so much to unpack from your experience and perspective. So why don't we just wind back the clock and start from the top? Because I think you have an amazing origin story.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me on this show. This is super nice. And I'll talk about a little bit of where I grew up. So I come from a city called Lucknow in India. And I grew up in a very small, cramped house where 3 generations existed simultaneously. In that house, there was never like 24-hour electricity, gas, water. The roof was caving and the streets smelled very foul, and it smelled of sewer because where I lived, there was an open sewer right next, like a big open sewer right next to our house. That's where I grew up. Very humble beginnings, but definitely there was a lot of love inside the house. And my dad was a shoe salesman for a shoe company, and my mother was a housewife. And my dad earned, on an average, a monthly salary of less than $150 and he used to sustain like a family of 6 people. So you can imagine like how it was growing up. But I did have a lot of fun here and there. At that age, I feel when you're very young, you do not actually think about too many things about what poverty or whatever wealth is. So I did enjoy my childhood like a lot just by hanging out, just doing random things, which I was doing. But it was fun. But more so, I actually got that realization of what is wealth or what is like where I actually am growing up is when I saw like a few times I started seeing, because I think there was a time where money was very tight. And then my mom used to skip meals and with a smile on her face. And she would be like, "Oh no, I'm not hungry. You have this food." So just to feed us, she would go hungry. And that is when I realized like what kind of environment I am in and what is having the scarcity of money truly feels. And that's, I think, one of my key times when I actually changed of, okay, I need to do something about this and help the family in any way, shape or form of how can I start earning this thing called money, which I've seen my parents kind of barter for things. So when I was age 13, I started just with the little education I had, because that I felt that was the biggest thing which can help you get out of poverty was education. So I started educating. So I really started focusing on education in my childhood. How I helped my family was when I was 13, I would come back from school and I remember like in my neighborhood, there were children much younger than me. And I would be like, you know what? I'm going to help them out, teach them whatever I'm learning. And they might be like 2 grades or 3 grades below me, but I would go to their house like in the evening and I would charge maybe, I think for every day I would go teach them for an hour. and I would charge like $3 or $4 a month for them. But that like small amount of money, how it helped me was that I would take all of that money and come back and buy like kitchen utensils or like plates or maybe like a mixer grinder or something of whichever whatever could be helpful for the house, because we didn't have all of those things. So I would buy a lot of those things to help any way or shape or form, which would help my mom or my dad or whoever is living, just to make their life a little easier. So I feel that's a little bit of my story of where and how I was brought up.
Yeah, the perspective. So a few things there. It's an amazing story, right? You because like you mentioned at the beginning, you don't necessarily think about money. You're born into the situation that you're born into. You said the house was full of love. You had three different generations. So you had a very close bond with your family. The story about your mom skipping meals like to just make sure that the family was fed. That's a type of unconditional love, and it's a type of commitment to family that I think a lot of people in places like the United States, people take that for granted because they're born and they just assume there's going to be food on the table every day. They just assume
Yeah.
that their parents are going to work and make ends meet and they're going to meet their mortgage or their rent or whatever. It's an assumption that I don't think it's not a given everywhere in the world. And so just even
Correct.
having that perspective and growing up around that and then trying to internally, you wanted to contribute or find ways to change the circumstances for you and your family. I think that people that come from that perspective and have that deep of a connection to why they're doing it, it makes it that much
Yeah.
easier when going gets tough. So I appreciate you sharing that story. And
Yeah.
so you started doing the tutoring and teaching other people in your teens. What did it look like when you got towards getting out of school age and working towards the professional world?
So that's so I think when I was in class, like my high school, like 10th, 11th grade, I think because I had educated myself a little bit and I had started getting decent scores, I started to feel more confident about myself of I can do much more, because I've always had that feeling that I'm meant for something more and I have that potential of doing something much more, like bigger. And this is not the condition which I'm going to accept right now, but there is something out like there. So I had this wild idea of, you know what, like growing up, I used to watch a lot of these American movies. Like I think a lot of people like just that was like the star of the show of, "Oh, I want to watch this." Or my mom was a big like movie, like she used to watch a lot of movies. And my brother also had some influence on that as well in terms of music and like watching like movies from the United States. And I watched this, but US at that time was this dream fairyland, like especially from where you come from. And then when you go out and see those on the movies, you're like, oh my God, this is like heaven. And like places like these exist, and you see those big buildings and like cleanliness all around, and like people dressed nicely and like having cars and like having a home. It planted some kind of seed that, why not me? Of like I could do or achieve that as well. And growing up, I watched a lot of these movies like The Pursuit of Happiness from Will Smith. And it also shows it was like a very contrasting thing of what you have to do to achieve bigger things, of how to go through so much and still achieve and become something. And I resonated with that. So I had this wild dream of I'm going to go abroad and study. But my biggest problem was we don't have money. Even like thinking about going to a normal college in India, that was like a big dream. But going abroad, that was completely baffling or completely different for me. I started regardless. I'm like, I'll figure it out. I feel I've always been that person of I'll jump into it and you know what, I'll just figure it out. Let's see what happens. And if not, like I'll have an experience from it. So I started pursuing that dream of studying. I started going out, and my parents never got educated, like a formal education. So my mom quit school after the sixth grade, and my dad did not even finish high school. So it was that outside world of education and going out there was very different from them. Like they don't know how the world works going that way. Of they don't even know how colleges, or you have to fill out forms, you have to give exams and stuff to get into colleges. And then going beyond that, they're like, we can't do anything. You go out and figure out. So I would come back from school and then do my research of, hey, what needs to be done? You have these thing called SATs, you have these thing called like college applications or reference letters. And then a lot of those like things I started figuring out slowly and steadily. And then I gave my SATs, got into colleges, got into really good colleges. But what happened was when it came, but I was solely reliant or strongly reliant on getting scholarships. But when the applications came back, I did get a scholarship, but there was still like a few thousands of dollars. And that would be even a difference of $10,000, $12,000, which we're like, oh my God, we don't have this money. So I can't do anything now. What do I do? And that happened to all of the colleges simultaneously. So I had to take a pivot again of, okay, I cannot go right now. So what do I do instead? So I chose to stay back in India, do my first 2 years of education here in India. And that was fun. That was a different experience as well, studying here. Did that, but I still had that dream of one day I will still go to the US because I didn't want to let that dream die out. So did that. And then in 2013, that was the time I graduated from college from the first 2 years in India. And then what happened was I still have that, but now you go and apply for the remaining 2 years. You go apply to universities in the US, and then you apply to a college and you finish your degree over there and then continue life from there. So I thought of planning of doing that. But the biggest challenge still, we don't have money. What now? So I waited for a year for my dad to retire. This was in 2014. He retired. And then what happened, how did we came up with the money is in India, if you have to take an education loan, you cannot just go out and take like a 3%, 4%, 5% education loan from the government or any source to fund your education. So what you have to do is you have to cross collateralize your house and borrow against it. Okay. If you do not pay, you have to borrow like you'll probably get 80% of the value. So my parents, and especially I think my mom was really, we need to get him educated. And my dad, yes, we have to. So my dad cross collateralized our house for an education loan, which got us like 60, 70% or 80% of the money. And the remaining 20% of the money he retired, so his whole life savings, so it's called a provident fund, where once you retire the company gives you like a big lump sum for retirement. And that was, I think, close to, let's say, $13,000, 12 or $13,000. So he gave all of that away as well, and then he cross collateralized the house. So now they have nothing for retirement. Now they don't have anything for the house, no money coming in, no savings. And they just gave it up for me to go have an education because this is the opportunity for all of us to change our like destiny. Did that, went to the United States. I only had $50 in my pocket because at that time, that was the only thing, the amount of money which my dad could give me. But for me, it was still a lot because I had never seen $50, which was the equivalent amount of India, ever in my life. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I'm rich. I felt like that. And once I land in the US, and this is like the second day, the first day I land and the second day I go out to have a meal. The first day I go out, I go to Chipotle, and the food which I buy is for $7. And I think that was like 6.90 or something. And I buy the food and it's like $7. And I'm like, oh my God, what now? I can only survive for another 7 days here. It was just mind blowing for me. I'm like, I can't, like, what do I start doing now? And since I went in the third year, majority of the jobs at that time when I go in the fall are already like filled up because a lot of people might do the jobs during the summer and then they get the opportunity to do that. And I did not have any clue about this is my first time coming into a country and navigating like, where am I? But it's felt like a dream place that, okay, finally I made it, but now I have to survive. Now I have to also survive for myself And I also have to send back money home because now there is no money coming in. So I started taking care of the family as well. Sixth day or seventh day come in, I'm just rushing around like places from department to department if there's any job openings. Luckily, there was one job opening, which was for a custodian. So, and that was like the only job which was open was cleaning the toilets. But that first of all was like, that took a hit to my ego because majority of these people I know, I'm like hanging out in classes, I'm just getting to know them, I'm trying to make friends with them as well. And I'm in the same dorm, in the same house, like living and cleaning, all of that. That was a big cultural shock, but I know that's treated as an opportunity as well. So I treated it as an opportunity for me to start earning because that's one thing which I feel that gave me that experience is that no job is too small and that no dream is too big. So that was one big thing. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like, this is something which I have to do. And when I started earning and when I got the first check from that, I'm like, hell yeah. Like, I can start like at least paying for my fooding. Like, I can have like food and I can also send a lot of money back home for my parents. Like, yeah. So started doing that. And yeah, from there, I took up like multiple different jobs of cleaning toilets and then cleaning, like going out and like shoveling snow or like painting or just like random. But it was like all under the university, which I was doing. I would just go as a maintenance coordinator. It taught me a lot of those things of like that the thing which I told you about, like there is no job small, it's all opportunities for me because I was like, yeah, I'm learning something new as well. Like I never knew how to paint a house or kind of do this. But sure, the ego in me at that time did have some kind of made me actually like humble in a sense too. It's okay, this is not permanent and this will change eventually. And what it like right now, let's focus on the main thing, which is sustenance of like my family and me. And I didn't care like what was I doing at that time. So that's how
Yeah.
I came to the US. And that was like my first 2 weeks in the US.
It's extraordinary, man. And I can't remember if I've shared this with you offline or not, but my dad, he moved from
Uh-huh.
Bangladesh to the United States in 1982. And he had a very
Oh wow.
similar story. Like his parents didn't have a ton of money. Bangladesh had gone through a civil war 10 years prior to that.
Yep.
He grew up
Yep.
in a very completely different world than I grew up in. And
Yeah.
his dad gave him money and he came over and went to University of Tennessee with just a few $100s. And same thing, he was cobbling together different jobs. He worked in the library, he worked in the
Yes.
International Student Affairs office. He was just stringing it together. So, so many parallels. So I can't even tell you how much it resonates with me because I always just I've had such admiration for my father for how he came with nothing and then he had a successful career in tech and has really changed the trajectory of not only his life but his entire family. He's always sent money back, and there's this perspective that people have when
Yeah.
they come from roots like that, and
Mhm.
there's no choice but to when your back is up against a wall and that $7
Yes.
Chipotle and you have $43 left to survive, you will do
Yes.
what needs to be done. So it's to your point, it's the ego, but it's also the humility of understanding like I'm doing what I need to do to provide for myself so that I can provide for my family and change the course of our family's future. It's already like a legacy level thing, even just on day one, just because you altered the trajectory of your entire family's life. So I have so much admiration for even just being bold enough to take that step. But what I love the most is what you did from there, which is you carved out this incredible path that even people that were born in America with all the opportunity in the world would feel lucky to be able to do. Why don't you spell out for us where you went from there?
Yeah, it was a wild ride. But like now that I look back on it, at that time it felt just living life. You're just doing things and taking action for whatever is required. But sometimes when you actually look back and like now that your lifestyle has changed and you see all of these things, what you have gone through, it makes you feel proud of like, yeah, I did that and I overcame that. It was like amazing. So now what happens is I get myself educated. I get into the dean's list. I get honors, like I graduate with honors and I thrive. Like in education, I am thriving in the US because I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can do this. I can. And there was like so many cultural shocks in between as well, while assimilating in a new culture and a new country altogether. I felt I was also simultaneously learning so many new things and also adapting to so many, I would say, slangs. So many, like people would just use slangs and I would like, what does that mean? And they would talk to me like I would understand that and move away. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, what happens? I'll tell you a funny story about that. Is I don't know, this is TMI, but my first class, like my first day in a lab, I was sitting to this next to this like girl. And what happened was I was writing with a pencil at that time. I was taking notes. And then I turned next to her and I asked her, it's like, hey, do you have a rubber? In India, a rubber means an eraser. So I never use the word eraser. Like as and when I talked to her and she would just give me this nasty stare. And I was like, I don't know what did I say. Just those small nuances. Later on I came to know what rubber meant in America. But just there were so many of those kind of conversations which used to happen on a daily basis, that I would be like, oh, okay, I'm learning something new. But it was fun. And then I graduate out of college. Funny enough, I became also a assistant, not assistant teacher. You have those resident education you can teach. Like I was using my experience, which I felt prepared for in India, which I was already doing in high school. And since I was doing since 13, I also started doing there, but I was teaching more students how to be like good at math or physics or like tech. So I was teaching them as well. I would go out. And so that was also a source of income, which I was getting. And then I graduated college. And this is when more, I feel like the painful process of figuring out how to stay in a country starts. So I graduated, and now I come to know that if you graduate from a college, you the day of like graduating, you only have 60 more days to find a new job and get into a job and then start earning or continuing that path. If you do not like find a job, or if someone doesn't sponsor you, you have to pack up and head home. So that thought to me was like insane, because I'm like, oh my God, what do I do now? Because if I do not earn money, I have a huge education loan back in India. I have to take care of my family. And if I go back to India, I won't be able to earn that much amount of money in rupees over here to like even clear off the loan. So I started like applying for jobs as aggressively as possible. Luckily, I landed my first job in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But in that phase alone, I had close to 70% of my friends who were also educating came to the US to get educated. They didn't land a job. So majority of them left back for home. You can see if someone has taken that big of a risk, if they do not have any backing back home, like it could like completely ruin your life. So I at least luckily got a job offer. I started with them, started working with them, doing that. And what happens, how the process is that you work for them for like a year. And then in between, there is something called an H-1B visa. So once you educate yourself and then you have something called, they give you a year. If you get employed, you can work for a year. But if you are from a STEM major, you can also you use the same visa for another 2 years. But what happens is in those 2 years, your company, which you are like a part of, they have to apply for your visa, which is called the H-1B visa. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I have a job, I have everything. It's completely fine. I can go out and apply for a job and then I'll have a work visa, which helps me stay for another 6 years in the country. Well, it was not. The H-1B program is a complete lottery system. So how it works is you can have a job, you can have the best of jobs, you can have a high paying salary, but at the end, it completely depends on luck that if you get a visa or not. So I think last 2 years, like 600 to 700,000 people applied for that job. and only 65,000 people get it. So it's a very small ratio and you only have two chances to get it. So it's wild that, for example, you can start working at a big firm or like a big company thinking that you achieved it. But if you do not get picked in the visa, you again have to pack up and go back home. So I was there, I was doing that. And I luckily got my first try. I got into the lottery. Now, out of those remaining like 30% of my friends, 70, 80% again went back home because they got a job in the first year, but they did not get into the lottery system. So I think like luck also was a big factor for me to keep staying in the country. And then I received my first, like I did my first job, I did my H1B, I got that. And then as soon as I get it, 2 weeks after that, I get terminated. And this is on December 7th. And this is wild because now what happens is that you again have 60 days to find a new job and find a company which will sponsor you. That is the biggest problem right now, is that companies generally do not want to sponsor you because they have to pay a certain amount of money to the government to actually bring you like offshores and then sponsor you essentially. So majority of people do not have that capital, so they'll reject you. So I essentially, the day I got laid off, I'm again in this panic mode of, oh my God, what's going to happen? And like now, again, that same stuff. I started like applying, like this was 7th of December. And then 8th of December, I started applying. My full time job was to apply for full time jobs. So I would get up at 7 o'clock and then go back, like I would finish my day at 6 p.m. I was just applying for jobs, like whatever was out there. And in the next 12 days, I applied to close to 10,000 jobs and I got two calls back. So two interview calls because majority of them had just rejected me. And I got two calls back. One was from GE and one was from Tesla. So I cracked both the interviews, but I went with Tesla because it was a much bigger company. They had more resources to hire me. They had more resources to sponsor me. And I also thought that was like a good trajectory because they were giving me a good title as well. So now I am, this is 2019 and now I am a R&D engineer at Tesla, which is, I'm still having this thought like, oh my God, did I like truly like am in this company and this is like a dream company for so many people. But that experience actually taught me of, hey, I cannot be reliant on just one single income. I then started researching on how to manage money, how to form these budgets, how to form like invest in stocks or invest. And that was the first time I was hearing about like investment in stocks because Tesla gave me some stocks. My previous company did not have stock options or any stocks, so they didn't give me any. But the next one gave me stocks, and I was like, oh my God, okay, I have to manage all of these. I started understanding what are restricted stock units or stock options, and I started learning. So 2019 was a lot of education about like how to create passive incomes or like side income streams or how to invest money to start growing that. If a situation again arrives like that, which I went through, I don't have to truly worry about money. So that's when I went out and I'm like, okay, I'll go full on, started reading books, started listening to podcasts, started listening a lot of these YouTube videos, tutorials. And then I reached to this podcast somehow. I reached to this pocket, like Bigger Pockets. But I initially started with Bigger Pockets Money podcast. And that's where I started. And then I would see a pattern of a lot of people coming in who had real estate backgrounds of, hey, I invest in real estate. I invest in. So that got me thinking of, that could be something because but my first initial thought was, I am not meant for that. That is a rich person's game. Who am I to invest in real estate? Or because I've seen like people owning homes and doing all of those things, especially in India, people who have massive wealth. That's when I thought, I'm like, that's not for me. But that was a limiting belief in me. But I still kept on doing it. It's like, no, I'll figure it out. Like, regardless, I will do whatever. So I started figuring it out. And then I was listening to this podcast one day, and one of the hosts of Bigger Pockets was constantly talking about how he wants to buy a Tesla with his cash flow. And I'm like, that's my cue. So I messaged him on Instagram and I'm like, hey, I'll help you understand what EVs are. Like, if there's a potential discount I can get you, I'll get you a discount on the car if you want to buy. And then I can bring you over to the factory. I'll give you like a tour, like how these cars are made or everything. So I tried to like lead with value of whatever, but I didn't say that I wanted to buy a house or anything. And then I created this massive PPT of what cars are, like how do they work, everything. So I sat down for like a day and then I presented it to him. And then he was impressed. And then he came in and he's like, hey, how do I help you? I'm trying to like dabble in this space. And I know you're a real estate investor. I'm trying to dabble in this space of real estate, but I want to eventually buy a house in the next 6 months. And he was like, no, we'll buy it in the next 45 days. I'm like, what, wait, hold up, what's happening? But he gave me a big mindset shift of it's possible to do it in such a short, because I think there's a big saying like the work expands to the time you give it. So if I give it 6 months, then I'll do it. But if I give it 45 like days, I will have it in the next 45 days. So that was also another mindset like shift which I had of compressing time as much as possible, of having these goals and not extending it for like a period of time. And then in the next 45 days, he coached me through everything, through books, through a lot of different things. I had never read like a book like cover to cover at that time, but I went out and I read those books every day. So it was like 1 to 2 days per book. And he would like, if you do not read this book, do not message me. And now I'm here though. I have to read. So it sounds like finishing book as soon as possible. Started reading a lot of books. So I was finishing one book every 2 days. And in the next 30, 45 days, I had read like 13, 14 books, which he had recommended. And by that time, my mindset completely shifted towards looking at money, looking at real estate, or looking. And I'm like, this is way more easy than I was thinking. Where my job, I was like this engineer at that time. Like, this is so much easier. This is a lot of basic math, which I could do. And like, it's not rocket science. And that was also a limiting belief, which I broke away from. Yes, I can potentially do this. So in the next 45 days, I got into my first home. So that was my first home in Reno, which I bought. And I started house hacking, which essentially means that I was living in one of the smallest rooms, and I was renting out the other 3 rooms. At that money, which I was coming, like getting, that covered my mortgage. So I started essentially living for free in my home. So that is, I was sorry, like I spoke a lot, but that's like how my real estate journey started with the first deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
today's episode is brought to you by the Remote Real Estate Academy, the community I launched last year where I personally coach investors and empower them to buy rental properties anywhere in the United States. My business partner Nathan and I have a collective 15 years experience with over 20 cash flowing out-of-state rental properties. We provide a step-by-step playbook on how you can build your own portfolio and start accessing the life-changing benefits of real estate investing starting today. Go to remoterealestateacademy.com for more info, or better yet, shoot me an email at aaron@aaronamin.com with subject line RREA, and I'll throw in a special bonus for podcast listeners who join the Academy. Now let's get to the show. No, I think it's important to, there's a reason that your story is so sequential, because the evolution, it also is exponential, right? It started with a very humble beginning in India where you had this very different perception of money. And then as you came to the United States, like you were forced into growing as quickly as possible, finding different ways to make money. And then you put yourself out there, like clearly you worked probably 10 times harder than the average person, overcame a lot of obstacles, both financially and even just this bureaucratic obstacles of how to stay in the United States legally. This has been a particularly challenging decade for figuring out how to do that. And like you said, at the end of the day, some of it comes down to luck. The fact that the
Yeah.
H-1B is on a lottery system, I have family members that have been affected by that too. And it's no matter how hard you work, no matter what you do, no matter how competent and capable you are, there's still an element
Yes.
of luck that decides whether you can stay in the US or not. And so like to your point,
Correct.
if being completely dependent on a single income from a single employer is very
Yes.
risky when you came from all across the world and you and your family risked so much for you to be here, it's scary almost in the sense that you want to find a way to diversify. And then the second piece that I just love about the story you told is that you figured out very early that leading with value was a good way to attract mentors instead of trying to force your way in or just you figured you figured out a way to provide value to someone who you admired their approach, and you saw that they were openly talking about something that they were trying to solve, and you found a way to
Correct.
take your experience, your perspective, and offer them something that they were looking for. And in return, you didn't ask them for anything, they offered. I think there's a really powerful lesson in there about mentorship and just being someone who can take action. And by the way, I think too that if that person had responded to you and offered that, hey, let's do it in 45 days, and they told you books to read, and then you just didn't do it, that would be catastrophic for your relationship with them. Because I think there's one of the worst
Exactly.
things you can possibly do is get somebody who's willing to pour into you their experience and their knowledge, and they give you something to do and you don't do it. So I just want to share that because I've heard stories of stuff like that. Or even me, like I'm not a guru or an all-knowing person by any stretch, but I do give away a lot of my time trying to help other people out. And one of the most frustrating things is if somebody comes to you asking you for perspective, you give it to them and they do nothing with it, right? So I
Correct.
just want to acknowledge and highlight that you earned that opportunity and then you acted upon what he told you. And that's how you ended up getting the outcome of buying your house, learning all this new stuff about how to manage money, how to get into investing, house hacking, lower your expenses to zero, like all this incredible mind altering stuff came as a result of you actually taking action on what the guy told you. So I love that story. And then it just keeps getting crazier the further we get into this story. So that was the first
Yeah.
deal, that was the house hack. And then now what?
Yes. I'll also tell you, like, I go 2 years back. So what happened was I came back. This was right at that time when I had just received my first job offer. So I had told them, like my company, that I'm gonna come back, and then start the job. So I started the job because I know once I get into the H-1B process, it's gonna take a long time where I wouldn't be able to just exit out of the United States and come back. Because once the visa is in process, you cannot leave the country. It's very hard and there are challenges. So just to avoid that, my immigration lawyer said not to even go back. So in 2018, what happened was my grandma passed away, and immediately a few days, because I think like we are a very close, tight knit family, my mom, just having that experience in her own arms, had a stroke. So her whole half of her body got paralyzed. So now you see in 2018, when I'm there and I've just started making a little amount of money, that fell in line where I'm like cleaning toilets and doing all of like the labor to sustain my family. And then as soon as I get a bump in pay or like my first job, this added extra responsibility happens. So even though I was working at Tesla, 90% of my income was coming back home because now I had extra money to pay like a physiotherapist, a doctor, a nurse, all the medicines which has to be taken care of, a cook, a maid, a cleaner, like all of those people I had to hire out. And all of that money came back home. And I didn't have much money. So I was also, it wasn't even paycheck to paycheck. It was like, even if for example, like a tire of my car goes out, I don't even have the money to pay for it. So I would have to pay, either put it on a credit card or borrow from someone else. So that whole piece of getting into real estate or like money management and all of that also came from that. That was a huge significant motivator for it. Came out of survival instead of, hey, I have to do this. I don't have any other option. Instead of, let's dabble around into this. So that kind of made me a very focused or like I was focusing on it very sharply of, I have to do this. There is no other option.
Absolutely. No, it's in the craziest thing too, and I have not ever lived all the way across the world. My grandma and a lot of my extended family is in Bangladesh. And I
Yeah.
don't know that I don't have the same perspective as you, but I saw with my dad how he would constantly be sending money back and he'd constantly be thinking. And then similar situation when his mother got sick toward the end of her life, it just broke his heart that he was 10, 12,000 miles away, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Because all the money in the world can't solve for being there for them and with them
Correct.
as they're going through this stuff. So it's a crazy story of contrast, right? As you're coming into your professional success and you're learning about real estate and starting to understand what your financial future might look like, then of course you're also dealing with the stuff at home. And
Correct.
it shows you how complex life can be. It's never a straight line, right?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. It's hard. Like sometimes just because you're in a different country, you see your friends and like peers around you, like going back to their family on holidays or celebrating holidays. But you cannot do that from such a like a far, or you just have to just call or be on video calls to celebrate. You cannot truly celebrate with them. And just being alone, even on holidays, like within the US, like unless people choose to invite me or do something like that, majority of them are just like me sitting at home, like not doing all of those things. So sometimes those also weigh you down, where I'm like, I'm just like here existing now. And like everything which is happening is just happening from afar, where my friends are getting married, my friends are having kids. So I'm like missing all of these like important moments in my life, which also is not the best for mental health, I would say. It's like, what am I earning money for? Like that, like there is no purpose to it. It's just mindlessly chasing after something, being in a survival mode that I am here just to do this. That's it. Like I cannot truly enjoy life. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big thing. I feel like that's the immigrant lifestyle, I would say a lot of people go through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something unique that I think people that are born and raised in the United States can't necessarily understand. And so I think it's important to tell this story. So we buried the lead with this whole interview because I think the origin story is so important. But what I want to do is maybe even fast forward a little bit to
Yes.
where you are today and also what you built between that first house hack and now. Because there's a really cool story, I think, of not only how you spent your time in the US, but also what you're doing now. But I'll let you tell that instead of me.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like, all of this was in a period of, sometimes you say growth actually happens exponentially. So now you see the origin story creeping in slowly. And then, like, as soon as I first bought my house, and this was like mid COVID in 2020, and from there, everything kind of starts going up. So what I do is I job. So I follow up with my mentor of, hey, what do I do more? Like, how can I keep like doing this? He tells me, oh, I have this mastermind of, and that's the first time I'm hearing mastermind. So it's a group of people where like from all the way from East Coast to West Coast, everyone is in the same place. You're surrounded by people like who are growth minded and who want to grow or do something much bigger in life. And I started, and it's called a mastermind. And I'm like, okay, cool. So he said, okay, join my mastermind. And we and another partner of mine have created this space of people to join and educate themselves and go to the next level. I was like, cool, I'm all in. So now I started living in my house. So I had started, because I was not paying any rent. So I started saving a little bit of money. So I poured that money into taking another big leap of faith of, you know what, I'll just join and figure that out. And that's when I started meeting a lot of people who were 2 steps ahead than me, 5 steps ahead than me, 10 steps or 20 steps ahead than me, who had got 10 properties, 12 properties, or were even like just buying their next property, but they had completed that. That gave me a lot of motivation just by surrounding myself with people of, hey, I can do this, I can do that. Gave me a lot of confidence in me to go out there and take bigger risks, because now I knew that I have a backing of people who are knowledgeable enough and have faced those things. So who I can go back and forth and ask those. And that's a kind of a thing which we are in a group as well, doing the same thing. Because now I truly understand the power of masterminds and surrounding like people who you surround yourself with. And from there, I started 2021, 2022, 2023 in the next years through various different ways. Through there is this thing called the BRRRR method, where you buy a distressed property, you rehab them, you rent them out, and then you refinance for a long term loan. You do that and you start earning money. And then if you do not have money, there are different ways of creatively structuring deals and like negotiating deals where you do not have to bring low money, or like you have to bring no money or very low money amount of money. So combining all of that, and like also later like later in my investing journey, I started partnerships as well. That helped me go from zero to like in 2023, 2022, like mid 2022, I was able to scale to 55 units. In the next 3 years, I was able to scale to 55 units. And this is, I still pinch myself, to be honest, that I don't feel I have done anything extraordinary or enough. And I still feel I have so much to grow, because now I want to do bigger things. But I feel it was just that grit, resilience of, hey, I would come back from my Tesla job, which was not a 9 to 5, it was more sort of 8 to 6. And then I would come back, and then from 6 to 9 or 10, I would be in these masterminds, have conversations, studying a book, or educating myself or doing something more. So it was constantly like learning and trying to put out offers, deals, doing anything possible to make more money. What started off as a cash flow goal was that I wanted to replace my income so that my family is taken care of. I started enjoying a lot by like 2022. I started enjoying, I was like, now I want to become an entrepreneur. I want to quit my job and get out of this and then completely switch to becoming an entrepreneur and do this real estate thing full time. But on my visa, I cannot do that. I cannot create a company which is like, so there are a lot of restrictions with my visa. I can only do that specific job, which is my Tesla job, or like with whatever company I'm hired under. I cannot go out just doing any other work. So I was like, cool. If that's the case, then there are three options I can go for. The three options for me to become a green card holder or a citizen is, the first one is I can continue working for another 25, 30 years for that company to get my green card. The second one would be marrying a citizen or falling in love with a citizen. But I didn't feel like that was like the right motive to do that. Like that went against my morals. But the third one was investing $1 million into a government backed project, which essentially is there to stimulate the economy. So if I invest that $1 million in that economy, like in that that project has to create 10 full-time jobs in the economy. So that's called the EB5 program, where you invest a certain amount of money and you can get a green card in return. But that also happens in the next 7 years once you start investing. So I thought, okay, I'll sell my portfolio and get the $1 million out. And then I will invest this money into this project and then I'll get my green card. Life happens from 2018, where had not seen my mom in that space of having a paralysis attack. So I'd left her before that. I'd seen her healthy. That is 2018. I went back home because of all the visa situation. I went back home in 2023. That's the first time I could come back home, where I got the green light to come back home to meet my family. And I came back home, met my mom, met my dad, and then 2 weeks later, my mom, out of nowhere on my birthday, has a heart attack and she passes away.
God.
Oh, yeah, that was brutal. That was brutal because I was doing all of this
Yeah.
for family. And suddenly one of my big why was snatched away from me. So that happened. And then a few weeks later, like my relationship of 6 years also ended 2 weeks later. So I was in a very tough spot at that time. And then my lawyer comes in and tells me that, hey, you have to immediately start selling these portfolio. And I was like, okay, I'll start like doing this, please, to get a green card. And then she eventually comes back and she's, oh, you have raised some of these money or borrowed money from some of these people. So now you have to give us a whole trace back to where that money came from. And I'm like, I can't do that. That's impossible. And then she tells me, so it's not possible for you to use that $1 million to give it to the government or invest in it. And so I felt like so suffocated at
Oh
that
my
time
God.
that I'm like so stuck. I can't do anything. Whatever I'm trying to do, it just like fails. And then I decided, you know what? Like, I have my whole life in front. Like, my value doesn't come from doing this, but it's more so what I can do. And if I cannot achieve that, like through all of these hurdles and like things going on, I would rather just exit, go back to family, come back here to India, live life with my dad who's still alive, make memories. So 90 days ago, I came back to India. Like I packed up everything, came back to India. I am having the time of my life. I'm like pampering my dad, taking him to places, making memories, meeting old friends, like doing whatever it's possible. But I do not have that stress now. But I'm still growing. I still have the team. I still have all my resources. Like all my friends are in the US. So I'm like, I'll still keep building in the US. I'll still keep buying real estate. I'll still keep buying businesses. I'll still expand over there. But I will figure out how to do that while I'm in India. So now I'm on that path of, okay, now this is a big challenge of how can I figure out how to invest 9,000, 10,000 miles away, but I'll figure that out as well.
Yeah, it's such an amazing story, and I'm so sorry to hear what you went through. I'm very glad to hear that you were able to see her one more time before that happened. But I
It's
knew this part of your story, but just hearing you describe it gave me the chills. But I also know that you're extremely resilient, very humble person. And I think one of the things that you said there that I just want to also highlight is nobody can ever take away the experience that you had building all the mindset evolution, all the new skills you built, the career you had, the money you made, all that stuff. If that all went away tomorrow, you are still equipped and strong and able to even do it all again, in a sense, if you needed to. And not only that, but you have this perspective of what it's like to be an immigrant going through and building wealth in America. And I know that's one of the things too that you're focusing on now is helping other people who might resonate, who have similar obstacles. Maybe they're held up by these H-1B lotteries, or maybe they came to be a student in the US, but they don't even understand what it's like to live there long term and what they need to look out for, how to navigate the whole employment cycle. There's all this very specific stuff that you had to learn on the fly and that most people
yes.
probably don't know. And I love, because you and I have had some conversations offline about how you're trying to create a framework for people who are in a similar situation so that there are a lot of courses out there on how to buy rental properties. And there are a lot of bigger pockets books and podcasts that talk about this, but not necessarily in the lens of the immigrant experience. And so I think it's really valuable what you're doing. And also, before I forget, I love seeing these pictures, because you and I are in a mastermind group together, of you taking your dad and traveling and doing all this stuff, this bucket list stuff, where I think that you had correctly understood that like time is limited, and having been away for as long as you were, and then having gone through what you did, right? It's like there's no time to waste in doing the things that are important to you and mean a lot to you. So the beautiful thing, to bring it all full circle, is that all that experience and perspective that you gained throughout your life leading up until now, you're now in a position where you're harvesting some of that with the experiences in your own family. And if I'm not mistaken, you're sitting in the house that you grew up in, right?
Exactly. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
still in that. Yes.
And now
Yeah.
you're in a
And
position to give it forward, which I want to give you an opportunity, because we're coming up on time here, but give you an opportunity to explain like what this next chapter is, what you're looking to do, and how you're looking to serve and help others.
absolutely. So I think since that was my biggest problem when I was like in these masterminds and group was that whenever I used to go out to these masterminds, the first question which I would ask is someone on an H-1B visa or is someone on a visa who can truly understand, because we cannot just go out and form a business or hey, do wholesaling or just do flips. Like I cannot do all of that because I can only be tied down to my company. So navigating all of those challenges and also navigating what is legal, what can you do. And majority of these people you ask who are immigration lawyers, because the code is so old, they would just respond, it's in a gray area or you cannot do it at all. But I had to go through 10, 15 like immigration lawyers to actually find a person who would say, oh, you cannot do this, but maybe you could do it this way. And that's the only thing which I needed. Okay, cool, I'll do it. I'll do that. And that's what I want to, because I've gone through that journey and built this portfolio. Now I want to help people who are in that similar stage of figuring that out so that they don't have to go through the same process which I did, but they have the much easier path of they can scale much more for anything. But they are trying to become financially free. They are doing it for a green card if they want to, whatever, or I want to just have some side income for their family or themselves. So I want to help more people or want to empower them in that space of, yeah, this is possible. This thing exists. You do this and you can also enjoy the life. Hypothetically, if you want to come back to India, if you want to go somewhere else, you can do that too. So you can have a grasp on your life. You do not have to be chained down by a visa.
Yeah, I love it. And I know we've been talking a lot about how do you find that audience, because it's a specific thing, but it's also something that is so common that people struggle with. And I have yet to find anybody who speaks to people going through this very specific type of hurdle. And so there's the tactical piece that you can help them with about how to navigate all the paperwork and like the different things you learned. But then there's the mindset piece, like you said, where you can build this life. Maybe it's in the US, but wherever you came from, like wherever your family is, wherever your roots are, and therefore probably a big piece of your heart is, you can still go experience and serve and build a life in those places without having to give up what you might have built in the US. So I just think it's such a cool story, man. I'm so grateful to have you on the show and be able to share your story. I want to do another one because you have probably 10 different parts of your story we could do an entire episode on. But
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this was amazing. Yeah, this is very like, yeah, and like whenever I talk to like about this, because there are like so many pieces to the puzzle where I something might, but like a lot of the major things I do remember of like how could I grow up, but there were obviously we can have a conversation again for sure.
of course, man. So if people want to find you, learn more about your story, learn more about what you're building, where can they do that?
I think the best place is Instagram right now. So my Instagram is Your Investor Mate. You can also search by my name, Gaurav Dutta, Gaurav Dutta, Dutta. But I think Your Investor Mate would be the best place. Instagram is definitely the place where I can be easily found. And I'm very active on that too.
All right. Hit him up. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And remember, if you ask him questions or if you're trying to get information from him, make sure you act upon whatever he shares with you, right? That's the best way
Correct.
to do yourself a service and hopefully stay in touch. All right. We'll make sure that's in the show notes. And thanks again so much for coming on. And we'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate this.
Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.